Dr. McMaster, you referred at some point that Gülen's ecumenicity. What are you trying to say?
I think I'm using the word ecumenicity or ecumenical in what I understand to be the original, if you like, meaning of the word, which has to do with the whole inhabited earth and the whole community of life and openness to that. And I think I detected in Gulen's approach to things an openness, a respect, a tolerance, an openness to learning from beyond the boundaries, if you like, of his own particular religious tradition. And I think ecumenicity is about reaching across boundaries, dismantling boundaries and barriers, if you like, and engaging with each other, and not just with each other as human beings, because I think ecumenicity also brings into play our interdependent relationships, not only with each other, but with the entire ecological reality and system of life itself, a community of life in which we are part and which we are in an interdependent kind of role, and therefore the openness and the trust and the tolerance that is required to engage with all of that. And I think I find that very much within what I sense and see of Gulen.
Thank you very much. With this, I think we can conclude this session, and we have a break right now. We will start the second section at 10:45. So. Okay.
As usual, we have three speakers. First, Dr. Tom Gage. Dr. Gage is a professor emeritus in English at Humboldt State University. He earned all his degrees at the University of California, Berkeley. He has lectured widely, including Turkey, Greece, and China, where he was resident lecturer on comparative education. He is a founding member of the Consultants in Global Programs, and he is the founder of the Redwood Writing Project, which is a federally funded national writing project. His paper is Dialoguing Across the World using the Gulen model to expand cultural horizons of secondary students. Dr. Gage.
Thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be here. I applaud the organizers of this excellent conference for bringing together the scholars that you have, and I'm delighted to be here. Over a century ago, H.G. Wells asserted that the planet is in a race between oblivion and education. Interestingly, in 1965, Coleman came out with Education and Political Development. And he found that schooling around the world that prepared students essentially in science and law for jobs in bureaucracies would likely add rather than mitigate global problems. The main educational goal being to prepare future citizens for a materialistic reality. As predicted, the educational policies of these states during the Cold War led to a swelling governmental bureaucracies funded by foreign loans, which were obtained by playing off the US and the USSR while discouraging free enterprise that promised jobs to the unemployed. One grave outcome of the negative influence of education was that such schooling transformed populations of illiterate, unemployed, and starving masses into populations of literate, unemployed, starving masses, a literate population of individuals seething with resentment and devoid of adequately developed spirituality to offset their desire for materialistic acquisition. As eloquently stated in one of the aims of this colloquy, all right-minded people need to respond creatively to redouble their efforts to sustain the hope for peaceful coexistence in a world of accelerating change. Hoca Efendi Fethullah Gülen cogently identified the solution, and I quote, "Now that we live in a global village, education is the best way to serve humanity and to establish dialogue with other civilizations," end quote. Mr. Gülen's idea of education, which explicitly includes tolerance and dialogue, differs from the ubiquitous factory model of the last century, which has failed to avert much of today's violence perpetuated by individuals or states. Fethullah Gülen further states, and I quote, "Each person is a creature made up of feelings that cannot be satisfied by the mind alone. It is through the spirit that we acquire our essential identity. Each individual is a combination of these factors, a person around whom all systems and efforts revolve attains true happiness. At this point, true human progress and evolution in relation to our essential being is possible only through education." The non-denominational schools around the world, inspired by Mr. Gülen, augur hope that informed education can secure Wells's victory over chaos. The curriculum of nearly all secular states lack at this point the goal of broadening the mind while enriching the spirit, the latter which includes attributes of love, dialogue, forgiveness, and tolerance. As Mr. Gülen states, and I quote, "Humans are creatures composed not only of body and mind, or feelings and spirit, rather we are the harmonious compositions of these elements," end quote. The late James Moffat concurred, quote, "Thought that is not spiritual is intellectually inferior because it too is partial," end quote. These two philosophers coincide by implying that education that addresses one without the other is fractional and unfinished. I will report on what I call cross-cultural fluency, a practicum of internet pedagogy that is based upon Moffat's theory of rhetoric, which links with Gülen's inspired schools, which could create essentially a bond between secular schooling and institutions like the Gülen-inspired schools. By raising moral and spiritual awareness through such dialogue, the Gulen Movement is in the forefront of emphasizing that common ground of tolerance between Muslim and non-Muslim. Such a common ground fosters through dialogue, inclusion, and centripetal integration rather than exclusion and centrifugal fragmentation that leads to violence and alienation. Moffat's ideas and the internet pedagogy that I'll be describing could benefit from the work of these two important philosophers, Gülen and James Moffat. To paraphrase Mr. Gülen, dialogue is a means of discussion of certain issues by coming together of two or more people, a process that forms trans-cultural bonds. As just one method to achieve such a bond, I am proposing to heighten cross-cultural fluency a series of online dialogic exercises between students in two schools in diverse social contexts. Cross-cultural fluency is defined as more than a symbolic system of language. It entails non-linguistic codes of geography, history, of business, of art, music, food, of different aspects of play, entertainment, and educational practices and class codes that exist in every society, all signifying cultural expressions. In addition to students crossing global spaces to communicate electronically, students writing fuse times into the tiles of what Mr. Gülen describes as a universal mosaic, portions of knowledge of what Anatolia has contributed to the modernity of the West, North, and South. I have in mind this aspect of Mr. Gülen's vision of how the cultural influences of the Ottomans and of Islam